Hello and welcome back to the Dark Mods New Mappers Workshop. This is Springheel, and today we are going to be learning about one of the more complicated subjects in the Dark Mod, and that is AI.
Drop that weapon and don't move.
AI includes opponents, guards, background creatures like rats or horses. It includes monsters, it includes undead. The most typical obstacles for players in the Dark Mod are AI. Now, AI is a rather large topic. There is a lot to cover. There are a lot of different kinds of AI. There's a lot of different things that they can do. So this could wind up being a rather lengthy lesson. I'm going to try to avoid the more advanced topics and just focus on the things that you need to know to make a beginner's mission. So to start with, let's talk about different types of AI. Now, you already know how to add AI to a map. It's the same as adding any other entity. Right-click, go to AI, and then pick the one that you want. But how do you know which one you want? There are a lot of different AI to choose from. Including some that are not even humanoid. So I thought I'd go through quickly and tell you what some of the basic categories are for AI. We're going to focus mostly on humanoid AI at the moment, but keep in mind there are things like spiders and rats. To start with, you can scroll through the different folders and just see what is there to look at. That can give you a good sense of the choices available. One of the first choices that you'll notice is that many of the folders are divided up into armed and unarmed. And this designates two different kinds of AI that have slightly different behaviors. Unarmed AI are civilians. They use different vocal sets, they have slightly different behavior when they spot the player, and they greet people differently. Maybe most importantly, civilian or unarmed AI can be knocked out even when they're alert, and so that makes them much less of an obstacle. Among the armed AI, you'll notice a few different suffixes on the names. There are several types of guards that have lesser at the end of them, and a few that have the suffix elite at the end of it. Lesser guards tend to have poorer armor. They are less effective in combat, and they have fewer hit points, and elite is the opposite. So there is a range of difficulty in the kinds of guards you pick. Archer AI carry a bow by default, and so they'll shoot arrows until the player gets close enough, at which point they'll draw a dagger. So selecting the type of AI is just the first step, and that will be based on your needs for your particular mission. But beyond that, there's a lot of customization that you can do. If you take a look at your entity window, you'll see that there's an AI tab, and if you click on that, you'll see a number of things that you can change, starting with skin. Now, the skin will show you all the different skins available for that particular AI that you've chosen, and your choice of skin matters. Choosing cloth, for example, means that AI will have no protection from arrows or swords. Whereas if you choose chain, a guard with chainmail, then that will give them some protection from arrows and swords. I believe it reduces the damage by 50%. So the skin is not just a cosmetic decision. It actually can affect how much damage the AI takes. Likewise, the decision of what head to put on your AI is also not entirely cosmetic. The type of helmet, or whether the AI wears a helmet at all, has significant gameplay implications. The rules for how an armed AI is knocked out by the blackjack varies depending on their helmet. Note that there are two different kinds of elite helmets, and these helmets make the AI completely immune to the blackjack at all times. So you only want to use these sparingly. The only way the player can get around AI like that is to kill them or to use a gas arrow. Things like eye patches and hoods can also limit an AI's field of view, which can make them less challenging for the player as well. So beyond the gameplay elements, you'll probably also want to think about giving some of your characters unique heads so that they are easily recognizable. I wouldn't recommend doing that for every single character, though. It's okay for generic guards to look generic. The next thing that you have the ability to change is the vocal set that the AI uses. This is something that's primarily cosmetic, but you probably want to have different AI using different vocal sets if they're liable to be searching for the player in the same area. Otherwise, it becomes difficult to tell who's talking. Each vocal set is based around a particular character trait, and you can pick the one that you think suits the character the best. Just be careful that you pick the civilian set if your character is unarmed. There's also occasionally some specific sets for types of characters like City Watch or mages or inventors. They're usually very, very similar to the default set, but they will have a few special lines here and there to give them a bit of character. Now there are a number of other things you can change in the AI tab, and we will look at a couple of them a little later in this lesson. But for the most part, you should probably leave things at the default setting unless you know what they do. So we're going to start by looking at stationary guards. At the moment, our AI is just going to stand there. They won't move unless they hear or see something that makes them go and investigate. But rarely do you want an AI that just stands there for the entire length of the mission. So we're going to look at some things that AI can do while they're standing in place. One of the most obvious is turning. So outside of when the AI is investigating, any movements you want them to make are controlled by something called pathnodes. This is a special kind of entity found under the paths folder. Different nodes do different things. We're going to start with some nodes that will cause the AI to turn in place. So we're going to scroll down to the node called a path weight and put that in your map. So you can see that the entity is there now as a small pink box. That's the path weight. Now it has an arrow pointing in a particular direction. But take a look at the entity tab for a minute. Now I'm going to rotate the path weight and see how there's a new spawn arg that has now appeared, a new field called angle. When that angle field is there, it will cause the AI to turn and face the direction that the arrow is pointing. But if you don't rotate it, if you just place it in the map, it doesn't have that angle field, and the guard won't turn. I'm going to clone a second path weight entity and just rotate it so it's now facing the other way. The goal here is to have an AI that looks one direction for a time and then turns around and looks the other direction. Now at the moment, neither of these two path weights are connected to this AI, this guard. So to do that, we highlight the guard, select the guard, and then select the first path entity and hit Control K to target them. That will create a line with an arrow pointing to that node. It might be helpful to think about the AI as thinking in arrows. So that right now the arrow points from the AI to that turn. When the game starts, that guard's going to turn that direction. But then there's no more arrows. There's nothing else telling him what to do after that, so he'll just stop and stand there for the rest of the game. To make him turn the other way, we've got to make an arrow that goes from the first node to the second node. And again, we can do that by selecting the first one, then selecting the second, and hitting Control K. The arrow always points towards the second thing you select. So this is not bad. Now the game will begin. The guard will turn to face one direction, he'll turn to face the other direction, but again there's no more arrows, so he's just going to stop and stand there for the rest of the map. So to make sure he keeps turning, we're now going to target from the second node back to the first one. So we're creating a loop. So he'll turn one direction, then the arrow goes to the node that turns him the other direction, but now an arrow points back to the first node, so he turns back to that direction, and so on. He'll just repeat those two nodes over and over again. And so here's how that will work in the game. One thing I should note, because we left these guards as hostile to the player, they will attack you by default. To keep that from happening, before you start the game, you want to type in no target into the console. Now you could change all the guards to Team 1 so they're friendly with the player, but then you've got to remember to change them all back, so no target might be safer. So as you can see, we were kind of successful. The guard is turning to look one way and then turning to look the other way, but there's something else we need to do to make this reasonable. We want the guard to wait in between turns so they're not constantly spinning around. Now one way to do that is just to type in wait and then a number after it, which is the number of seconds we want them to wait. Now by putting a single value there, you will create a guard who will wait exactly that number of seconds every single time. And that can start to seem a little bit robotic. So you can add some randomness to this. There's some debate among mappers about how much randomness is too much, or whether you want to use any randomness at all. That's really a judgment call that you'll have to make. There are pros and cons on both sides. It's actually pretty easy to add a little bit of randomness to a path node. You can add a wait max field, and that's the maximum amount of time the guard will wait. So if you have both fields, then the guard will wait for a random time that is somewhere between the wait and the wait max values. In this case, 5 to 10 seconds. And there you have it, a guard who is looking both directions with a wait in between. Okay, so that's stationary guards taken care of. Let's now move on to guards who are on patrol. To make a guard actually move from one position to another, we need to start using a different path node, and that's called a path corner. I'm going to have a guard that patrols up and down this hallway. So I'm going to select a path corner and place it at the top of the hall. Now with path corners, because this is the position that the guard is supposed to move to, it's important that they're on or very close to the surface. If they're floating too high in the air, the guard will realize he can't reach that spot and he'll just give up. So make sure you floor these. You'll notice that this path node also has an arrow pointing from it, and if you rotate it, it does add an angle property to the entity, but in this case that angle property is ignored. It's not going to actually impact what the AI does. So I'm just going to clone that path corner and put one down at the bottom end of the hall. You don't actually have to put a path corner every time you want the guard to change direction. The guards are actually pretty good at finding their way through the map as long as you have set it up correctly. So we want the guard to walk back and forth between these 2 points, so we need to make sure that each one targets the other. So select the first, select the second, hit Control K, and then reverse the process. You should see a line with kind of an X in the middle where the 2 arrowheads meet. Now I'm just going to add a guard to the map, and I'm going to link him or target him to one of the 2 path nodes. Once he walks to the first one, then he'll be in that loop where he'll go back and forth between them. Now you may have already realized that we probably want to add something else to this setup. Right now this would work fine, but the moment the guard reached the path node, they'd spin 180 and walk to the next one, and that is probably not very realistic behavior. So we want to add a couple path waits. We want the guard to get to the end of the hall, turn around, wait for a few seconds, and then walk to the next path node. So we're going to add a path wait up beside the top node first. We're going to have to clear the target that's already on the path corner and retarget it to the path wait instead. So select the path corner, then select path wait, then Control K. So we'll rotate the path wait so it's pointing the direction we want the guard to turn, and then we'll just add a wait value of 5 seconds. We need to link this path wait to the path corner at the bottom of the hall. Once the guard is done waiting, we want him to proceed on to the next path corner. And then we'll do the same thing to the node at the bottom. So when we have everything connected properly, the diagram of his thinking will look like this. One useful console command when you're testing guard paths in game is timescale 2 or timescale 3 or timescale 4. What that does is basically speeds up time by that amount. It lets you very quickly see what the path node looks like. Right away I can see that there's a problem. The guard is facing the wall here. He's not turning around and looking the other direction. Going back and taking a look at the path wait, I can see that I forgot to rotate it, so it doesn't have an angle property on it. Rotating it will quickly fix that. But there's a second problem that's not quite as easy to fix. If you notice, the guard bumps into the wall quite a bit as he's walking. I said at one point that guards can maneuver through the map very effectively as long as it's set up properly, but our map isn't yet. There's something else we need to do. It's time now to talk about monster clip. To understand what monster clip does, you need to be aware of how AI see the map. AI do not recognize models at all. They can't see them. As far as they know, they're not there at all. And so when an AI is walking around the map, if there's a model in its way, it will just run right into it. Now, there is an algorithm that makes guards turn around after a certain amount of time if they walk against something, even if they don't know they're walking against something, and they'll try a different route. But primarily the way that we get them to patrol around the map successfully is to cloak all models with monster clip. Monster clip is just a regular brush with a monster clip texture applied to it. And this means in-game the brush is invisible and non-solid to anything other than AI. The player can walk through it, objects will move through it, it will register as solid to AI. Now they won't bump into it because they'll recognize that it's there and they'll path around it. Making monster clip is quite easy. Just draw out a brush, go to the common folder, and under textures common, you can scroll down and see monster clip. If you apply that to the selection, you've now created a monster clip brush. It's very easy to do. The trick is in doing it well. So we're going to talk about how to make sure that you monster clip effectively. First of all, you want to make sure that your monster clip goes all the way to the top of the room. This clip that I've put on the wall here stops halfway up, and what will happen is that the engine will calculate pathfinding information for the top of that brush, which is a waste because it's not possible for guards to get up and walk on that. So by raising the brush so that it goes all the way to the top of the room or even out into the void, then the engine won't bother calculating it, which could potentially speed up your map. The next thing is to make sure your monster clip brush is a little bit larger than the model that it is covering. You can see on the wall here that I've actually made the brush come out a few units away from the wall models. This is a plus because it means you don't have to be very careful when you're drawing your brush. But generally you don't want them to get too close to the wall because the AI can bounce up as they walk over that angled trim along the floor. and that doesn't look very pleasing. So by extending the monster clip out a little bit, you keep that from happening. The only time that you don't want to do this is if you're not sure whether the AI will have enough room to get through a gap. And we'll talk about that in a moment. To save time, always look for ways where you can get twice as much use out of a monster clip brush. Here, a single brush keeps the AI away from the wall in two different areas. I've seen maps where it looks like mappers have tried to monster clip each model individually, and that seems like a huge waste of time to me. I like to monster clip in large batches, and then any models that stick out from the wall, I'll just put an extra clip around them. It doesn't even matter if the monster clip intersects with each other. Oh, one quick tip here. If you select one of the monster clip brushes before you start drawing a new one, that new brush will be the same height. So that's a good way to make sure that all your monster clip brushes go to the ceiling of the room. So you might be wondering at this point, what if I monster clip an area and then the AI can't get in it? Well, this is a good time to start talking about how much room AI actually needs. For example, when I draw out a monster clip brush here to cover that furniture, do I have enough room for an AI to get through that corner? The first thing to be aware of is that most AI in the game are about 32 units wide in terms of the space that they need to get around. Now, if you have a 32 unit gap, a guard will refuse to go through it. They'll act as if they cannot fit through that gap. So I find leaving at least 36 units is a safe gap to leave between objects. The best way to test this is to make yourself a 36 unit brush and place it in between the monster clip and see whether there's enough room for the AI to get through. Now, as it turns out, there is enough room right there. But I notice when I look on the other side of the bed that my brush will not be able to fit between the bed and that privacy screen. So I'm going to have to make some adjustments there if I want guards to be able to get into that corner. Also, on the topic of how much room AI need, you got to be careful putting path corners next to monster clip, or really any brush work. A path corner needs to be at least 16 units away from monster clip or other brushes, or it could cause problems when the AI tries to reach it. Another thing that you can ignore is any models that are off the ground that aren't going to get in the way of AI pathfinding. For example, there's no point in putting monster clip above the door because there's not going to be any pathfinding there. The only time you might need to do that is if you had flying AI like elementals. So I'm going to finish monster clipping the hallway here, and then you can see how in game the guard patrols very naturally. Doesn't get too close to the walls, doesn't bump into anything. It's very, very smooth. Now, most of the time, monster clip is used in this way to get the guards to walk around things, but there are times when you're going to want to use monster clip to make them walk on things. To demonstrate what I mean, we're going to go to the outdoor area of this map. I've already monster clipped it, and to save time, I'm going to take path nodes from the prefabs folder. If you look under prefabs AI, you'll see a number of pre-made paths that you can just drop into your map, including the same one that we made by hand for the guard in the hall. I'm just going to pick a default 4-corner path, put those in the map, ungroup them so that you can floor them all. Remember, you want your path corners near the floor. And then I'm just going to move them around to the map in places where they make sense so that you can see what happens when the AI walks around.
Obedience is the better part of duty.
Now at the moment, the guard is walking just the way I would want him to walk, but I'm going to do something that's going to cause a problem. I'm going to remove these stairs here temporarily and replace them with a sloping patch. I'll just clone one of the ones we had up against the wall and make it so that it stretches up to the door. Now you might think that the guard would be able to walk up that patch and enter the door with no problem. But if you watch him walk, he goes to the path node behind the fountain and then turns right around and goes back. So the engine is telling him that he can't reach that door, he can't reach his next path node in that room, so he skips it and goes on to the next one. So we know that AI ignore models when they're pathfinding. They also ignore patches. So when the only route up to that door is a patch, it ignores it. As far as it can tell, there's no route up to that door, so it just skips it. In order to make the AI walk up to the door, we've got to use brushes. Monster Clip works just fine, although you could technically use any kind of brush. But we're going to make a series of stairs under the patch. The brushes have to be within a certain distance to the patch in order to work. I believe it's 16 units, or at least that's the advice that's commonly given, although I have seen AI walk over patches that are higher than 16 units. I've also seen them refuse to walk over patches where there's a brush less than 16 units under it, so it can take a little bit of trial and error, but 16 seems to be a good average to aim for. Now you can see that the guard is able to pathfind up to the door properly. His feet still hit the patch. It's not like they're sinking through to the brushwork below. The code that determines where his feet hit is different than the code that determines where he can walk. So you're going to have to make sure that you put Monster Clip or some other kind of brush under anything that you want the AI to walk on that isn't already brushwork. That includes model stairs, that includes a patchwork bridge, or even a uneven patchwork ground cover. And that's about it for monster clipping. Time for a quick review, and then we'll move on to the next thing. Now, what we've covered up until this point really gives you the basics of adding AI to your map. You could probably complete a mission without knowing anything other than what we've already covered. But there are a few advanced techniques that I think are worth looking at because they're not that hard and they can add a lot of life to your mission. One more advanced technique that's rather simple to do is to give an AI multiple options about what to do next. Path nodes can have more than one target, and if they do, then the AI randomly selects between the available targets when deciding where to go next. For example, let's take this path node out here in the garden, the path corner. Currently it has a single target, and so there is never a choice when the AI reaches this point about what to do next. However, you can target another path node from here, just using the same method as before. Select the node, then select the thing you want to target it to, and hit Control K. Now there's two different arrows coming out of this path corner. So what happens now is when the AI reaches this, one of the targets is randomly selected and the guard will go there. So sometimes they'll hit this point, turn around, and go right back to the fountain. Other times they'll patrol off to the right there and then come back to the fountain. This is a very effective and easy way of keeping the player on their toes. There's no limit to the number of targets you can have on a path node. The engine will choose between them randomly, although it is possible to weight certain options more heavily than others if there's something that you want the AI to do more often. I'm not going to go into that here, but you can check out the wiki page on path nodes. I'll put the link down in the doobly-doo below, and it will go into more detail on that. Now, walking in circles is fine for guards on patrol, but what about servants or merchants or just guards who are relaxed and not expecting trouble. Having them walk in circles might seem a little bit unrealistic. Creating the illusion of AI interacting with their environment can really make your world seem more alive. So to create that effect, we're going to take a look at a new path node called an animation node, or pathAnim. When an AI is targeted at a animation path node, they immediately play the animation that's listed on that entity. So I've created a prefab that is available in the download link in the doobly-doo below, RIT Ponder. RIT stands for Random Interesting Things, which is a term I think Satha invented to describe instances of the AI sort of playing animations and appearing to interact with things in their environment. So you can see that this prefab has 4 different path nodes, a path corner, which is where you want the AI to walk to, then a wait, a animation node, and another wait. The AI waits for a couple seconds, plays the animation, waits for a couple seconds, then moves on to its next path corner. Otherwise, I find that the animation plays the moment they stop walking, which looks a little unrealistic. So I've decided I'm going to make the guard, in this case, walk up to the painting in the corner and just look at it. And so I'm going to move the path corner over in front of the painting, because the path corners are the ones that tell the AI where to go. None of the other ones affect that. Now remember, you don't want to put a path corner within 16 units of brushwork. So I have to turn my monster clip filter off so that I can see it, and just double check that I'm not within 16 units, and I'm not. So now let's take a look at the animation path node. You can see the field right here, anim, followed by the name of the animation you want to play. Now, how do you know which animation you want the AI to play? Well, you can go to the MD5 viewer and scroll down past all the different heads until you get to a regular human character. It's probably best to use the character that you're using in the map, so I'll scroll down to the Elite Guard. Ignore the fact that the preview sometimes looks a little distorted, but you can click then on any of the animations in the list and see what it looks like, or at least what everything other than the head looks like. There are a couple animations that I've made specifically to make it look like the AI is interacting with something. The 3 that you'll probably wind up using are the ponder animation, what's it called, the shelf idle, and the relighting animation, especially the electric ones, which have the AI reach out to touch something, and it can also look like they're grabbing something off a surface. The animation path node already has an angle spawn arg, but you can tell from the arrow on the entity there that that would have him facing the wall instead of the painting. So I've got to rotate that. So now we have to link up these path nodes with the guard's patrol route. So I'm going to take the path corner at the end of the hallway, and what I'd like to do is sometimes when the guard turns around and walks back, he'll detour into this room to look at this painting. So I'm going to take the path weight down at the bottom there, and I'm going to target it to the path corner in front of the painting. So that creates 2 targets on that path weight, so that there will now be a choice. And once the guard has gone through his pattern there, he's walked over to the painting, he's waited a few seconds, he's played his animation, waited a few more seconds. I want him then to proceed back to the top of the hall. So we'll take that path weight and we will target it to the path corner in the northern part of the hall. So now that everything's linked together, let's check it out in game. It looks like we forgot to put an angle field on that first path weight, so the guard just stares at the wall until the animation kicks in. Also, the ponder animation looks a little bit further down than I thought. It doesn't really match the height of the painting. To check if the guard really is choosing randomly between his two different paths, you definitely want to use time scale here. Waiting around for him to randomly choose them can be quite time consuming. Well, I feel like we've already gone over a lot to digest, but there's still a few things that I want to quickly mention that you may want to use, including sitting and sleeping behavior. To create an AI that spends the majority of the map sitting down, you first create the thing you want him to sit on, like a chair. You place the AI right up to the chair facing it so that when the game begins he's going to sit right down. It can take a little bit of trial and error to figure out exactly how close the AI needs to be. Then you go to that AI tab in your entity window and you scroll down to where there is a checkbox for sitting and select that box. Note that the AI just plays the sitting animation. It doesn't actually interact with the chair at all. That's why it's really important not to use a movable chair, because if the player were to actually move it out of the way, the guard would continue to just sit in the air. Since it is a model and it's not immovable, that means we need to put monster clip around it so that a searching guard doesn't bump into it. You've got to be careful that the guard is not too close to the monster clip. Remember, if he tries to get within 16 units of it, that can cause problems. So be a little careful in how you position the monster clip around the chair. Also, I just caught a little bug in Dark Radiant there that you might be running into. Sometimes I notice when I add something new and go to rotate it, it rotates around the origin of the last thing I selected. So if that happens to you, just clear all your selections and select the thing again.
It's too quiet. I should summon a minstrel.
To create an AI that's sleeping at the start of the game, it's a very similar procedure. I'm just going to clone the same AI, move him into the other room beside the bed. Just like the sitter, you want to put him with his back to the bed, and then we'll uncheck that start sitting, and click the start sleeping instead. Now I noticed that at the moment he's actually clipping into some world spawn there, clipping into some monster clip, which isn't good. He might start the game okay because he doesn't have to walk to that position, he's already there, but if he were to wake up, do a search, and try to get back to that position, I don't think he'd be able to do it. Because remember, they don't like getting within 16 units of monster clip. So I'm going to move that monster clip a little bit, I'm going to shift him a little bit, and then we'll see what happens in game. So one thing I noticed right away is that he's a little sunk into the bed. Now the animation just does what it does. It doesn't care what model is actually there. So if I want to fix that, I've actually got to lower the bed a little bit. Let's see what happens when he gets up.
Is there a noise? If I find some servant
Okay, so he makes his way back
duties.
almost to the right spot. He doesn't quite get as close as he did before. I'd need to either move that monster clip a little more or shift the bed out further from the wall. Now there is more to sitting and sleeping behavior. You can get guards to sit or sleep as part of their patrol by using path corners and specific sitting and sleeping path nodes. I'm not going to go into detail on how to do that. You can look it up on the wiki, and I think you know enough about how the basic system works now to be able to figure that out. Now, those random interesting things, like having a guard come in and ponder the painting or a piece of art, is really effective when the guard is relaxed. But it doesn't make a lot of sense for a guard to do that if he's on high alert. If he's just discovered a dead body, you don't want him to then stroll into the gallery and admire a painting. So you can take any path node and tell the engine that the guard should go there only if they're idle. or only if they're alert. So in my particular case, I don't want that elite guard going in and staring at the painting, or actually the urns, because I moved the path corner over there. I don't want him doing that if he's alerted. So I'm going to select the path corner in front of the urns, and I'm going to put idle only 1. And that tells the engine that if the AI is not idle, if they've been alerted, then they will not go to this path node. I'm going to put the same things on the path weights and the animation path. So now I know that if the guard is alerted, if he has his sword out and he's seen evidence of an intruder, he won't go into that room and do that. Likewise, you can make path corners that AI go to only if they are alert. So for the sitting AI, for example, I could create a path corner where he goes to if he's been alerted. And you do that by putting alert idle only 1. So if that sitting AI gets evidence of an intruder, if he's alerted, instead of going back and sitting down, he'll walk over to that corner, to that path corner. So that's a good way to change up patrols. You can have AI go to guard important areas if they're alerted, and you can stop AI from doing kind of silly things that they shouldn't do if they were actually aware of a killer in their midst. Okay, something else we really have to go over is how to attach objects to AI. You'll notice that in a lot of missions you'll have guards that have keys attached to them or pouches of loot, or they'll carry torches or other interesting things, and you might be wanting to do that in your map. Attaching things to a guard's belt, which is where loot and keys usually go, is actually fairly straightforward. Let's use an example of a key to a door here. If you remember, we had created a key already that was set to open this door. So we're just going to check the box again to lock it. The used by field is still there. So we'll take the key that we set on the little table, and we're now going to attach it to the guard's belt instead. First, you need to manually move it into position, which is a little finicky. You'll want to reduce your grid size down to a low number for this. You move and rotate the object until it's in the position that you want, and then you are going to bind it to the guard. It makes it easier if you give the guard a shorter name. Let's call this guy Joe. Then you select the key and you type bind and then Joe, and that will immediately attach the key to Joe, to that AI. Now this actually binds the key to Joe's bounding box, which means it will follow along with him, but it won't react to any animations that he plays. So we want the key to move when he sits and when he turns his hips. So we need to add an extra line here. Bind to joint, without any spaces, and then hips. Now just a quick aside about keys. Attaching a key to a guard actually has no relation to whether the guard can actually open that locked door or not. The key is irrelevant. If you want a guard to be able to open a locked door, you need to give him a special field, can unlock, and then the name of the door. And you can use as many as you need, just can unlock 1, can unlock 2, etc. This means that the guard can continue to open the door even if the key is pickpocketed from him, which isn't realistic, but is a concession that we need for gameplay. Now this method will work for attaching things like keys or purses or scrolls attached to the belt, but it's not the same technique used for attaching torches, so I'm just going to quickly touch on that. When you attach something that changes the way an AI behaves, like a torch, you have to use something called def attach. When an AI is holding a torch, you want him to actually hold his arm like he's got a torch in it, and bind will not do that. Def attach allows the object that you attach to the AI to actually change the animations that the AI plays. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on this. It is a bit of an advanced technique. I think what I will do is just include some prefabs. I'll include a guard with a torch, a guard with a wine bottle, and you could drop those into your map and see how they're done, and then use that to apply to your own AI if you wish. So I feel now like we have covered enough topics that I'm running the risk of just overwhelming you with all the different things there are to consider when dealing with AI. I think maybe we will wrap the lesson up here. I will put some links to additional information about things you may want to explore further, but now that you have the basics, and even more than the basics in some cases, I think it should be a lot easier to research the specific techniques you might be interested in. So let's see, we've covered different types of AI, we've covered path nodes, we've covered patrols, we've talked about random interesting things, how to monster clip your maps, how to attach objects to AI. That seems like a lot. I'm sure there are going to be things that I've forgotten and details that I've left out, so as always, if you've got any questions, feel free to post in the forums, and I will help you out there. And until next time, happy mapping.